Welcome to the Josh Huisman Podcast.
It is another week here on the Josh Huisman Podcast, and I am very honored to have a woman in this room who is really doing the Lord's work. She, for many years, has been heading up an organization called the Nashville Anti-Human-Trafficking Coalition. Her name is Mary Trapnell, and we were so blessed to have you here last night at New Hope Community Church, you and another group, a panel of experts, where we were talking about the issue of human trafficking, child trafficking, trafficking with women, and really raising awareness to an issue that, quite honestly, many people probably weren't aware of until this recent movie, Sound of Freedom, came out and has exploded onto the scene and brought all this awareness. So we're going to get into a lot of interesting things in this show, but I want to introduce everyone to you, Mary Trapnell, the founder of NAHT, N-A-H-T, the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. How are you, Mary?
I am great, Josh. I'm thankful that you had me on today.
Yeah. Well, I'm so thankful that you agreed to come on. We got connected through a woman at our church named Kelly Wegner. She's a deacon who oversees our women's ministry, and she's really has a heart for discipleship. And when she came to us at the church and said, we need to do this event called In Plain Sight, we want to bring in a panel of experts and really talk about what's going on here as far as human trafficking, and connected us to you. And right away, when I looked up the website and the work you're doing, I was like, I want to talk to you. I want to have you here and see what it is that you're doing. But to give everyone a little bit of background, all right? So when we're talking about the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition, when did that start?
So we formed as a nonprofit in September of 2019, but a group of us actually started 13 years prior as a missional community out of Christ Presbyterian Church.
Oh, wow. So that's the connection there with Kelly Wegner. So
absolutely.
So we're talking 4 years ago, a year before COVID hit the world and all of that. Now, I first heard of human trafficking, child trafficking. This goes back probably more than 10 years ago. I was invited out to Michael W. Smith's ranch, and Natalie Grant was doing a fundraiser where they talked about the need to combat human trafficking and that it's going on. And that's when I first heard things like there's more slavery in the world today than at any point in human history. And it doesn't register in my brain. And I heard about it, and then it kind of went away. And again, to mention Sound of Freedom, it has brought this into the national spotlight, really the world to a degree. So how has it changed for you? If you started this in 2019,
right,
what has the last several months been like after this awareness has come?
Well, it was great. Jim Caviezel, who stars in the movie, actually reached out about a year ago, and he was trying to raise funds for the movie and was challenged. And I think a lot of people know that he, had to wait 5 years before it all came together and they launched the movie. But we knew it was coming, and quite frankly, often I get frustrated because a lot of the movies that are produced don't reflect what's really going on domestically. It does reveal what's going on internationally, and certainly that breaks all of our hearts. But the way that the trafficking industry works domestically is not necessarily shown and revealed.
Right.
And so it can kind of actually work against us sometimes.
Right. That was one of the questions I wanted to ask you because, when I saw the movie, it, of course, does a good job raising awareness to an issue going on around the world with children specifically in the movie. But it really does for us as an American audience. We watch and go, oh, so that's an overseas thing that's happening. And then at the end of the movie, it says in America, and it presents some stats. But you're like, well, we didn't see that, though.
Right.
And so I walked away, and I knew that you were going to be coming in here, and we were going to be talking about this. And I thought, I want to ask Mary.
Yeah.
It almost makes you think, this isn't going on in Nashville. There's no problems. I mean, we're in America, right? And I wanted to ask you, okay, what's going on in Nashville that we don't know about? What's taking place? What's the reason why NAHT exists?
Yes. Well, in fact, that's a great segue to my story. I grew up, I was converted in college at Vanderbilt, a junior. Mm-hmm. And all I can say is I was swinging from the rafters one night, and the next day I woke up and I had seen the beauty of this Jesus I had heard about my entire life. Grew up in the church, grew up in a Christian home. We prayed at every meal, recited creeds my whole life, sang hymns, even read the Bible. But I had never really seen the beauty of this Jesus that it was all about until I realized that I was in a predicament. I had a lot of resources at my disposal, and yet I had a growing sense of guilt that I knew I couldn't work off, and I knew nobody could get me out of. And Corey ten Boom had written a little devotional that fell in my hands, and I read that little book and woke up the next morning a completely new person, transformed from the inside out. And that's sort of important to note because I can testify to the power of God to change a life. Yeah. And to give hope where there's total despair, and to have your guilt and your shame completely removed. Mm-hmm. And so it's out of that sort of context that I can say I ended up raising 3 boys. And stayed married to my husband, who I met in college and just knew I couldn't live without. But we had seen God do great things in our marriage and in the lives of our boys. And then all of a sudden, everybody was gone. My husband had a job that he loved, and I was sitting there wondering what I was going to do with my life. Mm-hmm. And I went home to visit my parents in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And I swung by my brother and sister-in-law's house, and she was cooking big vats of food. And I said, so what in the world are you doing? And she said, well, we're involved in that ministry. We're taking food out to the children who are living in a homeless community in the field behind the Cracker Barrel at the interstate. And I remember thinking, the field that I used to ride horses in? And she goes, well, yeah, and she goes, they were trafficking all those children at the bus stop out there. And I don't know, sometimes, there's a moment when somebody tells you something and it just shakes you from the top to your bottom. I mean, you can't shake it. And that's all I can say is that when I heard that day, I think God wanted it to resonate deep in my heart and soul. Yeah. Having been raised in the church and spent a lot of time, I was accustomed to missionaries coming in and talking about going overseas and seeing trafficking. Mm-hmm. It troubled me, but it was something that seemed far away. Yeah. And now that evil had found its way into my backyard, really, literally.
Yeah. So can we go a little deeper on that? So you're telling me, so this is a place where you grew up in Murfreesboro, and you would play there and as a child, and then you become aware. So you're married at this point? Are your kids grown and out of the house at this point?
I'm empty nesting. My boys are gone. They're not even in Nashville any longer. And
your sister-in-law tells you that there's a place where child trafficking is taking place in just outside of Murfreesboro, or in the same place where you grew up? In
the same place where I grew up.
So, I mean, for someone who's listening right now, they might be thinking, "There's no way! Come on, that's right down the street from us." How is that? Is that kind of thing still happening even to this day? Maybe Murfreesboro or Nashville, or what's going on that you see today?
So, what I can tell you is that, and what I know for certain is, it is going on in our community, and it's growing.
Oh my!
This industry is through the internet able to prey on every family in our community, and it's doing a great job. It really is.
And it's not just a children problem. It's because you work a lot with women who are pulled into this. And so if you talk a little bit more about how do children or women get pulled into this? I mean, what happens?
Yeah, how do they actually end up in this situation? Yeah. And that's where the children is a piece of the story, and it's a significant piece of the story, because most of the women that we serve at NAHT in our Restore services have a story of brokenness that started early in life, something that made them vulnerable to the industry. In the United States, instead of a snatch and grab kind of story, typically what happens is you have people who have a breakdown in their family, and a young girl is unfortunately maybe sexually abused by someone that she knows. Addiction can run in families and set the stage for someone to be vulnerable to a trafficker, or quite frankly, a broken home where maybe mom and dad are no longer living in the home together and the children are kind of left to figure life out. Mm-hmm. And they're very open to being, kind of groomed by someone who could be a father figure or a boyfriend or a mother even. Traffickers often get everybody thinks they're men, but often it can be a male and a female, or it could be just a female.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that was one of the interesting things in Sound of Freedom, that going along the lines of what you just said, is I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it,
right?
But there's a woman who is kind of used in the beginning there, who is heavily like one of the head people who puts this whole deceitful scheme together to get the parents to give the children to her, and because you wouldn't expect it.
Right. And in the industry, in the human trafficking industry, typically that person is called the bottom. She is the one that has been trained, and obviously she's been abused as well, mm-hmm. but they're kind of the business person, and they help recruit and they help manage the girls and the children. Oh,
wow. And so your sister-in-law says this about Murfreesboro, and that, mm-hmm. And like many of us, we hear something like that, our heart breaks, mm-hmm. But you're different because you felt like God was putting then something on your heart to do something about it. Where did you even begin?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't know. I was telling and talking about it with everybody that I could, and my first response was, we know people. Mm-hmm. I've been in this community for years. We know people. We'll just get this taken care of. And that was sort of a humble road to the cross, where Jesus was like, Mary, this is much bigger than you, little sister. You need to kind of slow down a second, and I've got some work for you to do. But you're going to have to trust me along the way. And so it's really grown my faith, Josh. And I think that's the thing I get most excited about, is that as evil and dark as it is, the hope of Christ is brighter.
Yeah. Well, what's really interesting to me is when you say about your own personal testimony, and how you found yourself at a time where your life was, you were probably making decisions and mm-hmm. doing your life in a certain way, but then when God got a hold of your heart and you had a transformation that took place from the inside out.
That's right.
That's what revealed to you that it could happen for others?
Exactly.
As well?
Absolutely.
Wow. And so when did NAHT come into place then? Are we talking about a year down the road from this time when you had the talk with your sister-in-law? When did that really start to?
Yeah, I was with a walking group, and we were walking in Percy Warner Park, and I was carrying on about human trafficking, and they were like, "Oh, Mary, yeah," and then I said, "No. What if I told you that 20 years from now, this beautiful Percy Warner Park where we're working out is where children are being abused sexually, and they're being bought and sold." Mm-hmm. We get upset when someone gets raped in the park. But what if it were absolutely going on daily and all night long? Wouldn't that be true? Well, yes, it is. It's hard. But God was using it to take it a little deeper in my heart and soul. Not that everybody else wasn't concerned, but for some reason I knew God was inviting me into a story.
Yeah.
And I used to be afraid of my shadow. So this is it's not of me at all, because I was just like, there is no way I can get involved in this work. And God said, oh yes, with me you can.
So how long was it from the time that you really started to get into this that then you began meeting either children or women who were in the grips of this? How long was that?
So in short order, I looked for an opportunity to participate and serve and give back in a place where I could learn more. Mm-hmm. And I volunteered at Thistle Farms.
Okay,
And I had a great experience. I got to be a part of a Bible study in one of their group homes and learned a lot. Becca has done great work and really changed the landscape in Nashville around this issue. Mm-hmm. Her ministry has touched so many different lives and different people, and I really learned a lot. And the great thing about being there was I got to meet some of the victims and interview them and talk to them, but it was a small number. Mm-hmm. Then someone invited me to be a part of End Slavery Tennessee. At that time, Governor Haslam and his beautiful, wonderful wife, Chrissy, were members at my home church, Christ Presbyterian Church, and got to know them. And this was an issue that was deep and important to him, and he had made some really big decisions for our state. And they were partnering with End Slavery Tennessee, a single point of contact agency. And so I got to be involved kind of on the more political side of things and learn kind of in a bigger scale what and who was making impact in the space. Chaired a big luncheon. And afterwards, someone came up to me and said, "Hey, Mary, can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Well, certainly." And they said, "We would love to sponsor you. We'd love for you to write a book." And so, I don't know, in my mind, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, how to be a short order cook for 3 boys,
Right.
How to stay married to the man you met in college and thought you couldn't live without. Like, what would I write a book about? And in a very serious way, she looked at me and said, human trafficking. And I took a deep breath and I said, well, you know what? I'm on the board of an organization. I make executive decisions. I've met several women who were victims, but I would just be quoting statistics, and I'm really not qualified to write this book. And God used that question, really, though, to make me go, well, what is their story? And who are these women? And where are these children? And how did it all happen? And so I went to a Bible study one night, and Paige Brown was teaching, and she was going through the book of Revelation, and she posed this question at the end of the study: when is the last time that you've been giddy about Jesus? And I thought, well, you know what? I remember those days when I was, born again, and life got really exciting, and it was so colorful, and I couldn't wait to spend time with Jesus. I have raised a family, and I've seen him do wonderful and mighty things. I'm more convinced of his faithfulness. I know more about him because I've been in great Bible studies. But as an empty nesting mom and kind of confused about what the Lord wanted me to do, I definitely looked up to the heavens and said, "Oh God, oh God, would you please meet me in this next season of my life? And would you put me on the front line of the kingdom of God, doing some things that I know I don't have the power to do?"
Yeah.
Now, I had no idea what that was going to be, but that was my cry. And the Lord answered that question. And so as a missional community, we traveled the state, going back and forth and interviewing agencies and looking at all the different models of ministry. We had a monthly meeting, and we would invite people to come in who knew more than we did and tell us a little bit about the human trafficking industry. And we had pastors to other executive directors of agencies. We had people driving in from out of state to these meetings, and that was about 10 years ago. And anyway, we learned a lot, made a lot of great friends, and then the natives got restless.
Yeah.
And we had a chance to start serving in some communities where victims were kept and held, and partnered with some other organizations to provide services and care for these people. And again, my relationships began to grow. And we were just a missional community of volunteers. We had no money, and we weren't looking really to become a nonprofit. And we would say, "Hey, somebody, what can I do, Mary?" And I said, "Well, this person's hungry." "Well, what do I do?" And I said, "Well, you see the Taco Bell over there. Can you go over there and buy a taco and bring it back and feed them some food?" And it was really a beautiful, beautiful season of serving. I learned a lot. And then Deanna Smith, who is the CEO of the Sarah Cannon Center, said, "Mary, I'd love to meet you for coffee." And I said, "Well, sure, that's great." And so we went, and she heard all about the work we were doing, and she said, "You know what, Mary, I feel like the Lord is telling me to quit my job and come work for you." And I said, "Who did you told you that?" And she said, "Well, the Lord." I said, "Well, I know him, and he's telling me to tell you to keep your day job."
I know him. I know you. And exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe just
I
hold
got
on
a
to
straight
that.
line too, and I'm hearing him tell me to tell you to keep your job.
Yeah.
So a month later, she came back and said, "What do you need? How much money do you need?" And I said, Deanna, I'm not doing a nonprofit. And she said, "Well, I'm going to give you $50,000. Dave Clayton at Ethos Church is going to hold it. It's going to be in your name. At some point, if you want to put some infrastructure around the work you're doing, and I think you should, it'll be there for you."
Wow, that's awesome. And so to kind of help me with the timeline just a little bit, because you said NAHT started in 2019, right? But you just mentioned, 10 years ago when you were doing it. So that was the End Slavery organization you were working for.
In Slavery, Tennessee. Then I rolled off the board, and we began just doing work across the state.
And then that's when you became aware of the things going on right here in your backyard.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. That totally makes sense. And so let me ask you this, because God's calling you to something here, and you're going to be doing this work, and you're mentioning you had someone show up and say, "Hey, God told me to come work for you, and I have $50,000 check that's going to be waiting for you." When you finally get ready to make the decision to follow, it's going to be sitting there waiting for you. And I'm assuring you, there's people out there right now who feel like God has called them to do ministries, and they're going, "Well, that didn't happen to me." I mean, I would kind of like that to happen with me. So when you say it was growing your faith, was it growing your faith because of that? Like God was putting things in place, or was it more like, hey, there were some big mountains that you had to overcome that was going to grow your faith?
Yeah, I think that, I had in the bubble, and let's just talk with your audience here. There's that bubble that the church provides, and it's a bubble of grace. And there is no question, there is so much sovereign care in that bubble, in that community of faith. But what I was realizing is that I was going to be like an overwatered plant where the root system dies. I had a lot of blooms, a lot of great things were going on, but if I did not get out of the church, I was just kind of going through the motions at that point in my life. And so I think stepping out in faith, as the Lord had called me to do this work, each time it was like, Lord, I cannot do that. I cannot do this. And it would always take me back to that prayer that night. Lord, would you put me on the front line of your kingdom? Would you put me in a position where I can't do this? And I know I can't. And I'm going to have to lean on you and your power to do this work. And so everything from like being acutely aware, like as people are driving me around and showing me what the human trafficking industry looks like in this city, and seeing the arms trade and seeing the drug industry firsthand, watching and looking at how they recruit victims and then they actually turn a profit on them was really hard. And especially knowing that there were people in positions of power that had to know if I knew. And why was nothing happening? And I remember, again, it was another big faith moment of just crying out to the Lord and saying, why is there not more going on? And why are the people in authority not doing more? And that's when, he made it very clear to me. He's like, Mary, when is the last time I've told you to put your hope and your trust in anything other than me?
Yeah.
And so it kind of cooled me back and go, okay, Lord, you will do this work, and you will work through the authorities, and you will work through your church, but it will be you who will get all the glory.
Yeah.
And so each step of the way, it's been like, okay, what is God doing now? How is God going to provide for this girl? How is God going to provide for this child? How is God going to provide the meals that we need, the clothing that we need, the education that we need, the support, the car, the job? For all of the women that God was bringing to us.
Yeah.
And at each step of the way, he has always been faithful and actually provided in an abundant way.
Yeah. It's wonderful. And, when you go to your website, and maybe what is the website?
It's called NAHTcoalition.org.
NAHTcoalition.org, and you go on that website and you can meet the team, and you've put a wonderful team of people together.
Yeah.
Who actually, some even come have been helped out of the background that you're talking about in human trafficking. We can talk about that here in just a little bit.
Good.
But then you can go and click the beliefs of the organization, and you can click on ways to get involved. And you guys want to, if someone else feels called to want to volunteer and help be a part, you guys train them and help them be involved in things. But what would you say is the core belief of the organization of what you want to do when you help people?
Well, we believe all roads of justice and healing lead to Jesus.
Amen.
Amen.
Right.
Amen.
Yeah. I'm sure you get no kickback on that.
Oh, no, none at all. None at all. None at all.
Not for me, you won't.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But it's really beautiful because early on with the population we serve, trust is non-existent. And it should be. Quite frankly, they have been abused all the way through the system.
Well, everything's probably manipulation.
Absolutely.
Everything.
And then even the girls, when they get arrested, you think, oh, wow, the police are safe or the authorities are safe. And unfortunately, there's corruption there. And so they get abused typically all the way into the system and coming out. It's just a very difficult, unspeakable journey, truthfully. So having said that, I had earned some trust by God's grace with this population, and I didn't want to confuse people who didn't trust. So once we've established trust, it's like, do I need to try to do sneaky Jesus, or do I just come out and say, this is who we are? Mm-hmm. And early on, we just decided, you know what, we're just going to be real clear. This is who we are.
Yeah.
And this is what we believe. But we hope that we can earn the right to introduce you to this man named Jesus. And I know in his name, lots of things may have happened to you, but that was the deceiver.
Right, right. And you know what? I believe, Jesus says that he is the way, he is the truth, he is the life. And I believe that with all my heart. And what I'm hearing you say is you do too. So what that means to me is when we try to do sneaky Jesus, as you referred to it, I like that saying, by the way. What we're doing is, listen, it all stops at Jesus anyway. So if we are trying to be ninja-like in presenting Jesus, whatever it may be, we're not doing anyone any favors at all, because all truth, all realness, all of it ends with Jesus. So why not just cut out all the other nonsense and just be open and honest, and it all leads to him anyway, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that it's wonderful to hear you say that, because if everything is manipulation, if you're just flat out transparent and say, this is what we're all about. I mean, to me, it just makes sense that you remove any deception, any chance that, someone would feel like you're trying to trick them into something, whatever. You're just open and honest about it. Right?
Absolutely. And, you're talking to a recovering people pleaser. And so it's really hard, if you're taking a people-pleasing mentality, to try to earn trust with someone, because you're doing everything that you think will work with them, and you're not necessarily true to who you really are. And so early on, it was like, okay, am I going to try to do this dance and try to make people happy, that I'm serving, or am I really just going to be forthright about who and what is most important to me?
Well, I would imagine too, because you are an organization that exists on donations. And I'm guessing you've probably had someone come along and say, hey, I would give some more money if you guys were a little less. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but if we weren't so upfront about the whole Jesus thing, maybe there'd be some more money or grants or something that could come along the way.
Absolutely.
But you said, no, this is what we're all about.
Absolutely. We've made a decision as a board, and I have an incredible board. I cannot say enough wonderful things about my board. We're united. We all are on mission doing the same thing, and they're quick to say, hey, what can we do to help you? But we made a decision not to accept any money that would ever cause us to come off of mission. And there's a lot of money out there that would, but we are integrous in that regard. We don't want anything to ever be the driver for what we are doing and why we're doing what we're doing.
It's very interesting that and whenever you're leading an organization, even in ministry, and I've found this to be true in my role as a pastor, you never think that people will come along to try to get you off mission, and because they have a mission that they want to see be pursued, and sometimes money is kind of dangled out there to get you to pursue someone else's mission. So it really is neat to hear you say that, like, hey, our board has made that decision, that we have a clear focus, and so just to read some beliefs that are on here. You guys have a statement of identity. It says, we are broken people loving and serving broken people. And if I just read your vision here, we want to see God raise up an army of humble servants who understand that all people are made in the image of God and therefore have inherent value, worth, and dignity. These servants would know that the sexual exploitation and the buying and selling of human beings is on all levels an abomination to the holy God who created them. And there's a reason I'm reading this. By their thoughts, words, and deeds, they would be committed to bringing the redemptive story of God as found in his word to any and all who would be impacted by the human trafficking industry. And I love it. The reason why I wanted to read that is because there's some language in there that spoke to me after I saw the Sound of Freedom movie, which deals primarily with children. And it, rightfully so, breaks your heart. And then I went and started doing the worst thing you could do on the internet, which is read the comments of people. And there is a wide range of comments. Some who say human trafficking doesn't exist at all.
Right.
And then you would say, well, there would be some comments that would say, well, yes, children, yes, but women, they're choosing it, let them be. And that's why I'm reading this, because is there a specific reason why it's saying all levels, whether children, women, adults? I mean, it just seems like you want to make sure everyone knows this is an across the board, all ages issue.
Yes.
That we need to be helping people and they have value.
Yeah. And we start with, the Imago Dei. It's or Dei. I don't know. You can help me out with that one. Whatever it is. Made in the image of God.
Made in the image of God, yes.
And here's the deal. We've got to start with there is a God, and in our country, we were founded that we all believed in this country was going to be centered around God. And this God had condescended and had given us his word, and in his word were the 10 Commandments. And so in the courthouse, you saw the 10 Commandments.
Yes.
It wasn't I'm doing and I judge based on what I feel like is right and wrong. It was based on what the word of God said was right and wrong. And what I see really happening in the communities is that somehow the idea that there is this God and that he created human beings in his image, and he has an opinion about how people act with each other. The 10 Commandments, you've got the first commandments, the first chapter, the first 4 relate to our relationship with him. And then the rest are about us relating with one another, And so to take that in my own hands, if I don't have a God, then I can determine, I can treat you just like I would a carton of milk. I can buy you and, I pick out which one I want and I can buy it. I pay cash for it and then I get to do with it as I please. And that is the hard part of the human trafficking industry. And the statistics are accurate. There's more slavery going on now than at ever any point in time in history.
Yeah.
And
what you're talking about,
it's really tragic.
To me, what you're talking about too is even when the Pharisees came to Jesus and were asking him, what is the greatest commandment? What's the most important commandment? But Jesus calls back and said, the greatest commandment is this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is like it: love your neighbor as yourself. Right. Well, then they ask, well, who is my neighbor? And then he gives the story of the Good Samaritan. And the story of the Good Samaritan is, there's someone who's beaten on the side of the road. And the first two walk by. And the first two of the examples he gives are basically priests, Pharisees, religious leaders who walk by. The ones who you think would do something, they don't. But it's the Samaritan who comes along and takes care of the person. And he says, that's the person who's on the side of the road, that's your neighbor.
Right.
And the point of the story is basically this: once you're made aware, that's your neighbor. That's who you're supposed to reach out to. And so all levels.
All levels.
God sees everyone with value and worth and dignity. He doesn't see the age of a person. He doesn't see the identity of a person. God sees that he created that person. Right?
Absolutely.
So we are to help that person. And that's when I go back to seeing those comments. It's just, I was like, why do I even do this? Why do I do this to myself I'm aware that there are people who just don't see the value in people at all. And I wanted to ask you this because it did bother me, because then you see a bunch of those comments going, this doesn't even exist. This is all just a political, it's a right-wing thing. And, why does everything always turn into right-wing, left-wing, whatever?
Exactly.
It's a real problem there. Yeah. Like, how does that, have you seen that? How does that make
absolutely.
you feel?
Yeah. And the sad part about that is that, again, I don't have an answer for evil, and so I just will do anything to get rid of it, right? Including say it doesn't exist, and it's just hard. Like when you were talking just now about just on all levels, I have to be challenged by the fact that I'm sure in some ways we are broken people, loving and serving broken people, as we state in all of our volunteer trainings and everything. It's that until I really understand how broken I am, it's difficult for me to consider the fact that there are people out there that could actually do these horrific actions, right?
Yeah, right.
But if I understand the evil that was bound in my heart, and until the Lord Jesus actually gave me a new heart, I'm coming at a place of arrogance, and I'm trying to play God and determine what's right and wrong, or I'm going to just, if it's right to me and I don't have an answer for it, then I'm going to put the darkness away and I won't deal with it.
Yeah.
But in the gospel, we can really say, you know what? Evil exists. And that is where I get to the privilege of saying, but, there is a goodness greater than the evil. And yes, this evil industry is destroying families, but there is a great big God that is redeeming families and doing things that you can't imagine in the lives of victims. And that it would be, one of the most exciting things I get to talk about are the women that I have on staff and in the part of my program, and the women that they've introduced me to that are women that I, if they never got out of bed every morning, it would make sense to me.
Yeah.
In light of all that they've endured. And,
yeah.
It is to see God work in their lives and to redeem what the enemy meant for evil, and now God's using for the saving of many and for his glory is just the most thrilling thing I get to do.
Well, let's talk about some of them here in just a moment. I had one more point I want to make because you made me think this, and I thought it's so good. When you talk about people, they see evil or there's some darkness or whatever, and I think what people do when they say, "Oh, it doesn't exist, it's not happening," is because when there's something presented that seems too big, or there's nothing that I can do about it, then it's better to just pretend like it's not even there. And we as believers, you say we're all like this. We are broken people, loving and serving broken people. I think we do the same thing with sin in our lives. Like if there's a particular sin or something that we struggle with, our response is usually to go, "It's not a sin. It's not a big a deal because there's nothing I can do about it." And so it's better for me to just pretend like it's not even there. I think our whole culture and world is built on now of people just going, "It's not a sin," because I struggle with it. And I don't want to have to struggle with anything, so I'm just not going to struggle with it. I'm just going to say it's not a sin.
Right.
And I'm just going to live whatever. And I think with evil, it's the same thing. I mean, you watch that movie, and I was probably like most people, you sit there, and it's a movie. There's elements in that movie that clearly are there for the entertainment. It's not entertainment. That's probably not the right word, but at least for the story, right? That they have to put together this movie. But then there are a whole lot of things true in there that are taking place that make you sit there and go, that seems impossible to fix. Like, what could I do? And so I can understand why then someone in a comment section would just go, "That's not real."
Yeah.
Because there's nothing I can do about it. And so I'm just going to pretend like it's not real, But you're not one of those people.
Well, and one of the things that I've learned in my 59 years of living is that when you sweep things under the rug, it grows. It's not like if we say it doesn't exist, that it's not going to continue to devour the fabric of our country and in the communities where we're supposed to be loving and caring for each other. It's just destroying homes.
Yeah.
It really is. And it's a lot of times people, too, want to put a socioeconomic label on it. What I do know is that every home in this city and community is targeted by this industry and has been impacted by it in some way.
How would you say that?
So it's a business. It runs on supply and demand like any legal business. And so what they're doing is they are driving demand. So that looks like pornography. If I can get someone hooked on images that they see on a video, right, and then sometimes you're paying for those images too, then all of a sudden that fantasy life begins to grow, and what they're experiencing on the net isn't enough. And so now I just click over here and whoop.
Yeah.
Just like you're ordering a meal, I go down and I go, I want a young girl, and I want her to be this color, and I want her to be this age and this size, and this is what I want. Ding. And you've booked her just like that. I was involved in a TBI sting several years ago, and the TBI is the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, our Tennessee State sort of FBI, and they did a sting in the Brentwood area, and they posted a young girl who was the age of 13 on a website in the darknet, and within the first, I want to say, 10 minutes, they had over 5,000 hits. So the demand for services is there. And as long as demand is there, traffickers will find supply.
Yeah. And for those who aren't familiar with the Brentwood area, we're talking about a fairly affluent area.
Absolutely.
It's Williamson County, and it's for those who are in this area, that would be a pretty shocking number.
Right. But if you were to talk to business people and you were like, how are we going to grow your business? Where is your target audience that's going to be able to afford your services?
Yeah.
Right. And you're going to go and you're kind of sit down and you'll kind of draw out your demographic, and you want to know everything about them, and you're going to want to make sure that you're catering to their needs so that they buy your product. That's exactly how the human trafficking industry does. And they know that people with resources and money are the people that they would love to be buying drugs and women. Yeah. Typically.
Wow. And then this is where we could probably get into some of the people you work with who are part of the organization. How do you help them get out of this? Those who have been trafficked, those who have been harmed and pulled into this world, and you have stories where you have helped people out of this. What maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so all those years that we were working as a missional community did a lot of things for us. And my resistance to become a nonprofit, actually, in God's design, was planned. And we were doing outreach work with women. And so I had a growing network of victims who would show up and say, Miss Mary, somebody needs help. Or, oh, my goodness, I think that they need, they've been shot, they're in trouble. And so we were pulling on resources in the community. And what I can tell you is the church has its obviously struggles, but in this area, the Church of the Living God does a lot of work. Okay. And so I never once had a situation where we had someone who needed help that we did not have it. And that's just fun to report. That's good news.
Yeah.
And so anyway, but I had a growing network of women who were victims. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I had a lot of intel. And so when we formed as a nonprofit, it was interesting because a lot of the women who worked for other agencies who were thrivers, working maybe at Thistle Farms, said, oh, Mary, y'all are doing the outreach work. You've got to keep going. So the secret sauce that we have is I have some amazing women who have been touched by God and have these powerful stories of redemption, and they inspire hope in a victim who's trapped in this world that is so dark and so bleak, and they think they have no way out. In fact, grace to them often looks like dying. Yeah. In fact, many of the girls will tell me they wake up from an overdose and they're pissed at God because they didn't die.
Wow.
And that's how bad it is. So when they
just want it to end.
Yeah, they want it to end. They want it to be over. And so it's really beautiful to watch some of these beautiful women go in and engage and say, I've been there. I know what you're going through. I know what it feels like to be beaten unmercifully. Yeah. I know what it's like to have a trauma bond with your trafficker and you think you can't live without them. Yeah. I know what it's like to get in that car and think, oh my goodness, I'm about to be raped. Will I live? I know what it's like to have the drug deal go bad and I got caught in the middle of it and I got shot. And so all of those experiences combined with the hope of the fact that there is this man named Jesus who's bigger than all of that. And if you follow me, we'll do everything for you. But I've been there. And it's real exciting when you see that connection happen.
Yeah.
And
well, you can't replace that experience. Yeah. I mean, to know that someone has gone through exactly what you've gone through, they relate. Even going back to that manipulation thing, I know what it feels like to question everything. Is it all a lie? Is I mean, that's such a powerful thing. And one of the stories I heard from one of your people who was on staff, in fact, she's the director of your operations, is Christina Meadows. And I heard her give a testimony online that people can go and hear. And she was someone who you got connected to, who, I mean, her story, my goodness, she's been through a lot of things. And everything that you just mentioned, I mean, she has been there, done that, and probably had some very low moments. How did you get connected to Christina?
So I had been praying that God would bring me someone who had the chutzpah to be a leader in the community that we were serving, and yet at the same time had been touched by God. And that's who she was. She had been imprisoned and was one of Tennessee's most violent women and was kind of a force to be reckoned with. She's got a lot of energy, and man, she rolls in the room and you know she's there. And she scared a lot of people. But man, the wilder they are, the more I love them for some reason. God just has given me a heart for these girls, and I'm drawn to them. And we were doing a writer's workshop, and Ashley Cleveland was leading it, and she started talking about being in the wilderness, and Christina started talking about the Bible. I said, I like her. She's wild and crazy, but she knows God's word, and I bet she's got a love for Jesus. And that was how it started, really. And then COVID hit. And my husband and I, as empty nesters, talked and prayed. And I said, Drew, I just really feel like that she's supposed to move in with us. I could see that she needed a new beginning, and she did. And little did I know, though, that the world was going to shut down. And we had 6 months together to really dream. And I got to listen to all of her stories and hear. It's that late night talk where you're just sitting there and things are just coming out, right? And I'm learning. I'm getting to that knowledge that author wanted me to write that book about, right?
Yeah.
And we're just sitting there for hours talking. And, that was right after we had formed as a nonprofit. And so she was able to, with a team of other women, be able to really put together what we talk about is survivor-informed and survivor-led appropriate services. So everything we do has someone who's a thriver on my staff that informs what we do. Because I don't want to spend your money, I don't want to spend my money, I don't want to spend my time on anything that I know won't move the needle for a victim. Yeah.
And so when you're hearing Christina's story, and so this was like 2019, right after NAHT has started, and then you have Christina move in.
Yes.
Is she still there?
No, she's on
her own now?
Yeah, she's on her own. She's doing great.
So when she's telling you some of these stories, are you sitting there going, okay, this is interesting?
Well, kind of. But see, we had been working on the streets for 4 years, and so I was very aware.
Aware.
Yes, very. Yeah, and had learned a whole lot. So I wasn't really surprised by it. It just, the Lord knitted our hearts together. And, my husband and I would say she's like an adopted daughter. We had these 3 boys, and now we've got this wild girl, and she's great, and she's fun, and we do love her like family. So, but she really does bring the hope of Jesus to the women that we serve.
Yeah, and she had a wonderful testimony that I listened to, and she doesn't seem to be a recovering people pleaser. She seems to be just a here I am and deal with it person.
She is absolutely fired up. Yeah, she shoots it straight.
Which is great. And in her testimony, she talked about wanting to train and help volunteers who can be in there as well. So how does NAHT do that?
So we do a once a month. It's the first Tuesday of every month. We have a Zoom training, and anybody who would like to volunteer can go online. And again, we have the Thrivers on there leading that training. So they get to hear from a Thriver. They get to hear what their story was like and how it informs the work we do. And that's step 1. Step 2 is after you fill out all your forms and you tell us what you're interested in and what you're good at, we have a team that looks at all of that and tries to find a pathway for you to engage and be a part of a rescue. Maybe your tennis team wants to get together and, for $2,000, you can sponsor a rescue. We give a lot of mothers of boys an opportunity instead of the young boys, looking at porn and trying to figure out how to buy services. Hey, why don't you spend some money and be a part of a rescue? You can be the hero.
Yeah.
And teaching young boys what it looks like to be a part of the redemption part of...
Be a part of the solution as opposed to part of the problem.
Absolutely.
Definitely. And it's interesting to me, if we can go way back to the beginning when we were talking about maybe even the grooming side of this, if we could, because you just made my mind go to, kids spend the most time on these social media sites, with the Instagrams and the Facebooks and all the different stuff. And I recently did a message talking about the amount of time children spend on their phone and how those sites are used to essentially rewire children's brains and send them things specifically to things that the phone can tell what their eyes are staying on the longest or what they're spending the most time on. And when you go to some of these sites, they start sending ads and start sending things that are essentially grooming these children to into a world. You talk about with young boys and or pornography. Truth of the matter is pornography is a boys and girls problem now. I guess I'll just call out one. I mean, you set up an Instagram account and you go into search immediately. No matter what age you are, you're going to start getting sent pictures of people who are either posing in suggestive ways or whatever it may be, and it's all rewiring brains to desire the stuff that you're talking about. And it just scares me as a parent with 4 kids and many families and people who are raising kids and who are young, whatever it may be. And everywhere we go these days, our solution is to just hand our children a device and say, here, just go ahead and have fun. That'll be your babysitter while so I can talk to my friends. And, that we're opening up a world to them that whether they're being groomed for something or not, they're definitely having their brains wired to be a part of a problem that's going on.
Yeah, and we have a program called Educate to Recognize, and it's targeting middle and high school students, raising awareness, and hopefully being a part of the prevention side of things. But what we realized when we were doing these talks, we were making connection with the kids. They kind of actually knew what we were talking about. But the parents
is scary.
Yeah, I know. It is. But they get it. They actually do get a lot more than what the parents did. And so then you think, well, okay, now we've raised awareness, we're talking about it, but are the parents equipped to deal with it and deal with reality? Are the teachers so anyway, one of the things that we're doing with Educate to Recognize is we're trying to come up with curriculum and video materials and things that we can use to help train pastoral staff. What happens in the youth department when somebody has attended an Educate to Recognize event at their school and then now they have some questions. Is the youth staff prepared to answer those questions and engage with them? What if a victim really does come up and sort of risk being rejected or what her trafficker has convinced her of, that something bad will happen if she tells anybody? If she actually comes forward, is that person ready to handle the information she's bringing to them? So, there's some great resources, and we hope to be one in the future that everybody turns to that gives you a little more information and knowledge and know how to actually engage with someone who's struggling.
Yeah. Well, I'm so thankful that we got connected and that Kelly pulled this together because when this episode is streaming, we will have had an event that happened at New Hope called In Plain Sight, where we brought on a panel of experts in this area of human trafficking and talked about it and how it's taking place in Williamson County, the greater Nashville area. And, Mary, you were a part of that. And I'm sure, we're recording this before we have the event, but I'm looking back on it now. I'm sure it was very informative and something I'm very thankful that was brought into our space, that there are organizations like yours that God has called to do this work, that and that if then someone else comes along and says, I feel called to do that as well, you are there to really guide them, say, here, we could use some help. Let's do this. So I want to go back to the website and all that stuff. And I also want to encourage other pastors and anyone who's listening to this, that if they want to get connected to you all and do like an event, what we just did with In Plain Sight, the panel and all that, do you do that pretty frequently? Yeah.
And Josh, thank you for bringing that up, because we are really praying, and if you see in our vision statement, that God would raise up an army. And so what we are really targeting are the leaders in our community. We're doing this some 30-second PSAs that we just met with a marketing group, and we're going to be pushing out in the community, hoping to reach a lot of people. That gives a statistic about, this human trafficking industry as it relates to our community, and then ways that they can actually get involved and make a difference. We are targeting, though, the leaders in our community, and that would include pastors. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for the work you're doing, and I know God is going to bless this time together. I really, really believe He will. And we have a proposal going to the governor's office, and we're hoping Governor Lee will actually do a PSA for us. And if we can, as leaders in this city, kind of band together around this issue and really use our voices and our platform to speak out against the human trafficking industry, but for its victims, we can make a big dent. We really can.
Would you say that's the biggest challenge you face?
I think
Awareness?
that it is the opportunity before us.
Okay.
I think the challenge is probably the human trafficking industry.
Okay.
I mean, it's an evil force that is working night and day. And I'm afraid, unfortunately, a lot of America is asleep at the wheel. And what NAHT gets to say, we kind of borrow on our acronym. We say not NAHT, not on our watch, you know. And there's a story of a church in England that was meeting upstairs and praying worship, and down below is where the slaves were kept. And during a tour, a lady went down into those chambers, and they were talking about where the slaves were kept. You could see the claw marks on the wall, and it was troubling. And they said, but I want everyone in here to know that while they were down here being tortured and brutally, taken advantage of, the church was upstairs singing praises to God. And so what I hope is that in some ways this is going to be a clarion call to the church to wake up in Christ. Wake up, wake up.
Don't let history repeat itself.
Yeah, let's don't let affluence and all of the beautiful gifts that God has given us be used to grow pride and arrogance. But may it keep us humble and realize that we, the American church right now, has more resources at our disposal to really be on the front line, watching God do some things that we know ultimately we really can't do, and letting those resources really bring hope to those who are hurting most in our community.
Yeah.
And I would say the human trafficking victims are definitely the lowest of the low in our community.
Yeah. Well, let me just tell you, thank you for following the call that God put on your heart to do it. And that when this was something that God made you aware of, that you didn't just not do something. You actually have been doing a lot of work, and I'm so thankful. Every time I meet someone like you, I'm inspired. And I know that there are probably people listening and watching now who feel the same and want to do something. They don't want to see history repeat itself. They don't want to be someone who's just on the sidelines, not doing something. You know what my mind went to when you said, what America does is kind of turned an eye. I think, if I'm just being blunt honest with you, I think right now one of the problems we have in our Western culture is we're just so self-focused and individualized. I got enough problems, and if that's somebody else's problem, then that's not my problem. Or I have my own goals and my own dreams, and for my family and my kids, so I'm just going to focus on that, and everything else can fall to the side. That includes church, that includes God, that includes, and it includes the missions that God calls us to, where then we aren't doing what the Lord calls us to do, So.
Well, and it's really interesting because I was just talking with someone the other day about the rich young ruler, and he shows up, man, I'm doing everything that you want me to do, God. I'm doing it. And with the best intentions, I'm sure he is. I need to make good on my religious belief system.
Every law.
I followed it all, man. I'm doing it. And then he goes to the heart of the man and he says, go and sell everything. And I'd love to say that doesn't mean really go sell everything. But I mean, really, God is calling all of us to lay down our life, give it all, over here and away in favor of just showing up for duty to the true commander of the Lord's army. And he's on mission. I mean, he's moving. And so we'll miss it if we're distracted. And we have a lot of distractions. Josh, I just feel like that there's a lot of reasons why we are just running around, and we're missing God's best by showing up and being on the front line.
It's so funny. You just made me think of this, and a lot of times people think, well, if you have affluence, if you have all this stuff, if all your dreams come true and you get all these blessings, that's clearly a God thing. Well, sometimes the devil will give you every single thing that you need to keep you as blind as you can possibly be.
Yeah.
And then not see the things that really God wants you to do. Because the more you have, my mother-in-law always says this, the more you have, the more it owns you.
Yeah, it can.
And the rich young ruler is a perfect example of that. Jesus put that one thing that he said, here's the one thing I know for a fact that you will never give up.
Well, I have a fabulous board, and if you have resources and, I just want the work to get done.
Yes.
Clearly, I'd love for you to come to NAHT and help out, but they are just a phenomenal group of women and men who really do want to see their resources go to work.
Yes.
Interview somebody on my board and ask them, like, how are you doing this thing? Like, what does that look like? And I'm sure they would love to share that. Also, come to NAHT, reach out to us, and we'll help you find a pathway. It may not be at NAHT, but we'll help you find a place where you can use your gifts and talents to make a difference.
Yeah. Well, I would love to hear more of your story and come to the In Plain Sight thing that happened at New Hope yesterday or the whatever. It already happened. But there will be more opportunities to hear your story, to meet your board, to hear from the people who have been taken out of this human trafficking and are now sharing their testimonies, like Christina Meadows and others as well. Let's say the website one more time so people can go there.
It's nahtcoalition.org.
Okay. Go to nahtcoalition.org, and there's all the information there. There's places where you can donate. You can see who's on the board. You can see who's serving. Such a wonderful thing. And so I know this is probably the first of many talks that we'll have about this.
That's great.
So,
thank you, Josh.
Yeah,
I really appreciate this. And just remember, we're following Jesus, and he's leading us in hope.
Yeah, and that is the best thing to do in general, right?
That's
Can't
right.
go wrong that way.
No, can't do it.
Thank you, Mary Trapnell. Mary Trapnell of NAHT, Nashville, Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition, and I'm going to be praying for you and the work you all are doing.
Thank you.
For God's continued favor on it, and that He will provide for you. Okay, I feel like I want to pray. I'm going to pray over you right now because I was like feeling led. Lord, I just come to you right now, and I thank you for Mary, and I thank you for this work that you've placed on her heart. And I know you see these children, you see these women, you see all of the seedy, gross, evil underground of this, Lord, that is keeping people in bondage. And I pray that you would just start setting people free, that you would bring an end to this evil that is all across the world, Lord, but it's right here in our own backyard. And Lord, whatever needs to be done, I pray that you would begin putting in motion the right people, the right resources, the right government officials, the right everything that's needed, Lord, to begin to bring this darkness into the light and to wipe it away, Lord. And I thank you for Mary, and I pray your blessings and favor on her and the people in her organization. Keep them healthy, keep them strong spiritually and physically, Lord. When they're feeling down, lift them up. Show them that you are in this work, Lord, as you deliver people and bring more and more of them to Christ, Lord. Thank you for that. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mary.
Thanks, Josh.
All right, everybody, thank you for being here on the podcast today. We're here every single week, and I just want to encourage you, go and check in on the NAHT organization and support them and whatever that looks like. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.